Welcome to the HRchat podcast, bringing the best of the HR and talent communities to you.
Welcome to another episode of the HRchat podcast brought to you by the HR Gazette. I'm your host today, Bill Banham, and today we are joined by the awesome, incredible, amazing Peter Weddle. Peter is CEO of TATEK, the well-known association for talent acquisition solutions. TATEK is a global trade association for the talent acquisition technology industry. Collectively, its members power or operate over 60,000 sites worldwide and provide state-of-the-art products and services for virtually every facet of talent acquisition. Once described by the Washington Post as a man filled with ingenious ideas, Peter has authored or edited over 24 books and has been a columnist for the interactive edition of the Wall Street Journal, National Business Employment Weekly, and CNN. Peter, it's an absolute pleasure and an honor to have you on today as a guest. Welcome.
Thank you, Bill. It's great to be here.
Let's get going with our questions today because we've got plenty to talk about. Firstly, tell us a bit about yourself, your career history, and how you came to be in your current role.
Well, I'm a living embodiment of that old phrase, a jack of all trades, master of none. I've done a lot of different things in my career, but they've all in one way or another had to do with human resources. I did a stint in the U.S. Army, graduated from West Point and did some time on active duty. But when I got out, I worked my way up and became a partner in the Hay Group, which at that point in time was one of the world's largest consultancies in human resources. And my particular focus was on the intersection between humans and technology. At that point, I got the entrepreneurial bug and bought a company called Job Bank USA, which was arguably one of the first companies to use technology to identify the best candidates for open jobs. Sold that company in '96, and with an infinite amount of naivete, I hung my shingle out and declared myself a professional writer. And through pure dumb luck, had an opportunity, as you noted, to start writing a biweekly column for the Wall Street Journal about these new things called job boards. And I did that for over a dozen years. And that led to a number of other businesses and organizations. And finally, in 2007, we launched TATEK, the Association for Talent Acquisition Solutions. So it's been a long journey with all kinds of fits and stops and starts, but ultimately, as I said at the beginning, it really focused on my fascination with how people can use technology to do their jobs better, get more satisfaction out of their jobs, and ultimately be rewarded more fulsomely because of their performance.
Awesome, thank you very much. So, elevator pitch style, what does TATEK do?
Well, as a trade association, our job is to help our member organizations perform at their peak. So we hold a number of conferences that are designed to encourage peer-to-peer interaction around emerging trends in both among employers and among job seekers, so that we understand the requirements, the needs of both of those communities. We also talk about best practices and standards. For example, there is the growing use of pay for performance in recruitment advertising, pay per click or pay per applicant. But what a lot of employers don't realize is that a fair number of the clicks for which they are paying, and the research shows that it could be as many as 50% of the clicks for which they are paying, are actually generated by bots, by automated systems on the web, and have absolutely no value to an employer. So we are publishing a standard. It's called a Declaration on Traffic Quality, which will ensure transparency in the way that clicks are reported, so that employers know what they're paying for and can be assured that they're only paying for clicks generated by humans, by candidates that they could actually take a look at. So again, we're focused on best practices, we're focused on trends, new ideas, new strategies and tactics, anything that would help our membership do a better job serving those two communities, employers and job seekers.
What does an average, if there is such a thing, I don't think yet, since I've asked this question, I've received an average answer, but what does an average working week look like for you, Peter?
Well, it's hectic and it's long. I'm a morning person, so I'm usually in the office by 6 in the morning, and I usually spend a good 12 hours in the office. And my responsibilities range from dealing with our membership, their questions, their needs, their requirements, their desires, and trying to promote our membership to those two constituencies I mentioned earlier, employers and job seekers. So it's a fascinating job because there are so many facets to it, but it's hard work. I don't have to tell you, this is a very demanding environment for the business community these days, and we are a global industry. So our membership stretches, literally around the world. Of those 60,000 sites that our members power and operate, probably a good 40% of them are outside North America. So we're dealing with different time zones. We're dealing with different cultures and behaviors at work. So it's always a challenge and always interesting.
If they were, this is one of my silly questions. If they were going to make a film about your life, Peter, which actor would play you and why?
Well, of course it would be Brad Pitt. I mean, there would just be no doubt about it. I wish. If you could see me, I'm short and plump and bald, so I think a more accurate selection would be Danny DeVito. And we just, have that look. What can I say?
Okay, let's get a bit more serious. Let's talk a bit about you outside of the world of work, so to speak. What are your biggest passions outside of the workplace?
Well, I have two. One is my family. I've been blessed with 3 great kids, and my wife and I spend as much time as we can being involved in their lives. They're all married, and we've had our first 2 grandchildren, so that's very exciting for us. And my other passion is writing. I try to write every day, early in the morning. As you mentioned, I've done a couple of dozen books, but just recently have tried my hand at fiction. The first 22 or 23 were nonfiction works about the world of work, the changing world of work, the new challenges that are being presented for working men and women around the world. But in the last couple of years, I thought, it would be fun to try to do a novel or 2. So that's really what I spend most of my time working on, and it is a true passion because, as anybody who's ever been published knows, it is a very humbling experience. You put your heart and soul into that, onto those pages, and if you're lucky, a couple thousand people will buy your book, and that's about it. It's the rare person, the John Grishams of the world who get to go on to bestsellers. So you have to do it because you're passionate about it, and that's certainly my case.
As a bit of a celeb within the talent acquisition world, Peter, here's another. It's not a silly question, but it's just something that occurred to me when I was preparing for this particular interview. I'd love to know what's the worst job interview question that you've ever heard. I don't know. Maybe you were sitting next to somebody else who asked the question. Maybe it was you who asked the question, and then afterwards you're like, "Why on earth did I ask that?" Can you share that with us?
Well, there are just so many competitors here for the worst job interview question. I would say that the one that I was sitting in on, it was not a question I asked, but I was sitting in on this interview where a person was asked, if you were a plant, what plant would you be, and how would you help grow our business? It was such a silly mixed metaphor and off-the-wall question. I almost gagged, but it was actually asked.
I remember, I think maybe it was my first ever job interview. Somebody asked me if I was a kitchen utensil. What kitchen utensil would I be and why? And fortunately, that had come up in my interview preparation with a friend of mine who'd heard it elsewhere. So I went with blender because I like to.
Oh, nice.
Because I like to mix things up. I said. I got the job, so you never know how much that helped. Tell me, what is your leadership summit on pragmatic ad buying all about, and why is it important to HR and talent professionals?
Well, we do 4 events a year, 4 conferences. 2 are industry congresses. That is, they are events designed for the CEOs of enterprises in our industry and their direct reports. Those are both held in North America in the spring and the fall. We do a similar congress in Europe. Next year it will be in Barcelona, and it's more of a global event. Again, a couple of days, all designed for the senior leadership in the talent acquisition technology industry. But the leadership summit that you've mentioned, the leadership summit on programmatic ad buying, is a series. It's a one-day, one-topic event. Next year will be the 3rd that we've done on programmatic ad buying. And we think that's a particularly important initiative because programmatic ad buying has taken over e-commerce in virtually every other facet of online advertising. Instead of having human beings try to guess where best to place their ads and optimize their spend in a way that takes advantage of the plethora of sites that are out there. Instead of having human beings try to do all of that, it uses computers to identify which sites are most likely to generate the best yield, and in the case of recruiting, generate the best yield of candidates, and also to turn off the spend once a sufficient number of candidates have been generated. So we're talking about taking a technology that's been used to sell Uggs and cosmetics and plane tickets and so forth, and now we're trying to bring it into talent acquisition. And it's a very complex business, but basically it enables an employer to say, I think I need X number of candidates in order to fill this opening, and I'm willing to pay Y amount of money to get those candidates. And with that information, the machine will identify which 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 sites are most likely to generate that number of candidates at that price. If that occurs right away, then unlike in the past where you'd spent your money and whether you had enough candidates or not, you kept on spending, well, once you get the number of candidates you need to fill that position, it stops spending that money and it transfers the money over to another opening where you aren't getting enough candidates for your particular opening. So the computer is helping you to move your spend back and forth across various websites and across various openings so that you maximize your return on investment and get the number of candidates you need to fill your openings with quality new hires. It's easier to describe than it is to actually do. As I said, it's a very complex business, which is why we continue to have this summit on an ongoing basis. This year's summit will take place in June 7th and 8th in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and it will have 2 tracks. One on programmatic ad buying applications. What are case studies that have occurred recently, and what are the lessons we can learn, the best practices from those applications? And the second track will focus on programmatic ad buying technology. And that gets right down into the bits and bytes of how you use the data, how you use second and third party data, how you build advertising networks, and so forth in order to deliver the outcome expected by the advertiser. So typically the kinds of folks that attend that particular event are employers who want to know how they can harness the power and promise of programmatic ad buying for their own talent acquisition, as well as agencies and publishers, job boards, digital media companies, and so forth. And it's that very rich kind of interactive community that enables us to really generate, I think, a really high take-home value for the folks who attend. And it's only one day, so you're sipping from a fire hose, or a fire hydrant probably, but you're certainly getting a lot of tactical level information that you can take back to your organization, as well as some of the strategy involved in applying this new capability to talent acquisition.
That sounds awesome, and I'm just going to break from this usual format here to say to you, anything that we can do to help spread the word, let us know, because I think there's tremendous value to talent acquisition and HR pros out there by attending. One of the stated goals of TATech is to promote a better dialogue between talent acquisition technology companies and employers. How does TATech help HR and talent acquisition professionals participate in that conversation?
Well, we try very hard to look for venues where we can have an interaction with employers that's not sales-based, that's not a exhibit hall where people are standing at booths, but rather it's an opportunity to have a meaningful, fact-based discussion about what's working, what's not working, what are the requirements that aren't being met, the kind of the wish list on the part of the employer that the talent acquisition technology is not meeting. So to that end, one of the things that we do is we co-locate our spring Congress with the SHRM Talent Management Conference. So our conference precedes their event and is co-located with them, so that our members are actually walking up and down the halls as the HR professionals and the talent acquisition professionals arrive for that event. And it's an informal way of promoting that dialogue, but it seems to have had a good effect, that we're seeing more and more sort of coffee break conversations about how better to harness technology for talent acquisition. And then, as I just mentioned with the Leadership Summit, some of our events actually do open participation to employers, so that the conversation is more structured. There are moderated discussion groups, and there's an opportunity to really tackle subjects together, looking for solutions that work for both parties. So, lots of different venues that we try to encourage so as to promote that kind of crosstalk.
I'm going to put you on the spot now, Peter. Can you list 4 or 5 speakers that you've seen at one of the TATech events who've had a big impact on you, and name them and tell me why they had a big impact?
Well, one certainly that comes to mind is Chris Foreman. He is the CEO of a company called Start Date Labs, which also has a subsidiary called Appcast. Chris is a wonderful speaker. He gets up in front of an audience and admits right off the bat that he was a geek growing up, and the big thrill for him was to go to computer camp in the summer, and he's very self-deprecating, but he's one of the smartest guys you'd ever want to meet. And he has a gift for talking about very complex technology issues in a way that everybody can understand. And I think Chris's vision for bringing together the very best technology, not to replace recruiters, not to replace talent acquisition professionals, but rather to give them the tools so that they can perform at their peak, so that they can invest their talent in finding good hires for their organization. I think is really exciting, and as I say, he's a great speaker. So he was certainly one that I've enjoyed listening to a couple of times. Similarly, Ian Siegel, who is the CEO of ZipRecruiter. You may have seen that advertised. They've been spending a small fortune on television and other advertising. Zip is a great company, and Ian is somebody who came from outside our industry into talent acquisition, came from advertising technology, and just brought a fresh approach to looking at how to take the bits and bytes of technology and to apply it to the challenges of sourcing and recruiting top talent. And he gave a presentation about, where are we going with the kinds of sites that are being designed to attract talent. The old-fashioned job board that basically had content that was interesting to active job seekers and nobody else is probably a endangered species. And there's a very specific reason for that. According to research done by the U.S. federal government, at any point in time, just 16% of the workforce is actively in transition. So any site that's totally dedicated its content to active job seekers is really only targeting less than 1/5 of the workforce. Moreover, that 1/5 of the workforce already knows that if they go to an employer's site directly to their corporate career site, they're going to find great talent acquisition opportunities. So what employers need job boards and social media sites and aggregators to do is, yes, of course, attract active job seekers, but also attract the other 84% of the population that is passive. Now, some of those people will never leave their current employer, but some of them are interested in learning about new opportunities where they can advance themselves in their profession, craft, or trade. So the challenge for sites going forward is how to create content that will attract people who aren't looking for a job, because those are really the people that employers want to be connected with. And Ian's vision was to use a number of strategies. One might be like Glassdoor, user-generated content that talks about the culture and the business practices of various employers. Another might be to provide content that focuses on career self-management. We teach people an awful lot about their profession, craft, or trade, but we seldom teach them anything about how to build a career in that particular career field. We don't teach them how to audit their own skill set and identify areas that need remediation. We don't teach them how to evaluate when they should move in order to keep their career moving forward. We don't teach them how to deal with a biased or prejudiced boss. And all of those principles and practices of career self-management are incredibly important today, because employers aren't going to be that resource that they have been in the past, that people are going to move around, and therefore they're going to have to take care of their own career. Sorry, didn't mean to give you a soliloquy, but those are two folks that have really, I think, opened my eyes to the possibilities out there.
No, that was great. Thank you. Earlier on, I think you mentioned SHRM. So outside of your own events, what other conferences and expos do you attend regularly to get a feel for the pulse of HR tech and new ways to succeed within recruitment?
Well, I have to admit, I'm not much of a conference goer. I do go to the SHRM event from time to time, and I've gone to the ERE event, SourceCon, from time to time. But I'm a writer, so that means that I'm also a reader, and I spend an awful lot of time on the various sites around the web looking at content that has been presented at some of these conferences, but also freshly published that offer insights and ideas that might be interesting and get me thinking outside the box.
So if there was ever a guy in the know, you are him. In terms of new technologies and ways to improve talent acquisition processes in 2017, could you share a small list of a few software tools our listeners should check out?
Well, I'm going to chicken out on you here, and the reason for that is that I represent a whole association full of great talent acquisition products and services, and if I pick one or two or three to focus on or to highlight, I'm probably going to hear from everybody else about why I didn't remember them and didn't think to add them to the list. I do think that we are into an era where there will be some really exciting developments in the area of artificial intelligence and machine learning, for example, where things that used to take up an awful lot of recruiters' time and provide very little value at the end of the day in terms of finding the right candidate for an opening. Those things we can teach machines to do, and they can probably even do them better than humans. So let them do some of that grunt work so that recruiters can exercise their talent for identifying the best individuals for their organization's openings. So I would, in terms of categories, I think AI and machine learning is certainly one. We've talked about another. I think that we're on the cusp of a real revolution in recruitment advertising with programmatic ad buying. I think that will undoubtedly have a huge impact on our industry. But there are some really innovative things being done in recruitment marketing, in interviewing technology, and even in the area of mobile apps, where we can change the whole experience of job search. Most of the mobile apps today, were not created as mobile-first products. They really took a candidate experience and crammed it into a small handheld device. And really where we are going is to begin with the handheld device, with that technology first, and to create a candidate experience that is truly unique to and appropriate for that very small screen and the kind of shorter attention span that it necessarily elicits. So those are the kinds of things that I think we can look forward to in 2017. We're going to see great leaps forward with all of those, I suspect.
I completely agree. I was lucky to recently interview one of the bosses at a new company called Hire, and to your point, they're all about the mobile app. They've got a website because they have to, but it's very minimal, and they help with acquisition of temp staff in retail and within hospitality. It's, I think we're just going to see that the continued onset of the app focused businesses where the old ways of doing things no longer work and no longer relevant. Anyway, that's just my take. You're the interviewee, not me, so I'll stop talking about
No,
that.
I completely agree, and I know that company, so I think you're absolutely right.
Shout out to Josh Karam, lovely man. Okay, so we're coming towards the end of this particular show. Before we wrap up, how can our listeners learn more about you?
Well, TATech has a website. It's TATech.org. So we're on the web, and there are individual sites focused on each of our events. There are links from TATech.org to those particular sites, so you can learn more about our spring congress in conjunction with SHRM in Chicago, April 22nd and 23rd. There's a link to our RecTech conference in Barcelona. That will be May 17th and 19th. And links to our other two events, the Programmatic Ad Buying Summit and the Fall Conference in Denver. And there's more than you'd ever want to read in my profile on LinkedIn, for example. So if you've got nothing better to do, you can certainly find out more about me there.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, that just leaves me to say, Peter Weddle, CEO of TATech, thank you for being our guest today.
Well, thank you for having me, Bill. I really appreciate it.
And listeners, I've been your host, Bill Banham. This has been the HR Chat podcast brought to you by the HR Gazette. Until next time, thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to the HR Chat podcast, brought to you by the HR Gazette.